Hi everybody, Erin here from Creative Soul in Motion. I have Brett Blumenthal on the line. Hi Brett.
Hi.
Today we're talking about following your passion, your purpose, your center, and figuring out how to get from where you are now to where you want to be. These interviews are meant to be almost like maps of other people's journeys. They are not necessarily answers or guides to your life, but I wanted to showcase people who have gone through drastic or different changes and have really made impacts in their lives on the way that they want to live. So thanks so much for being here today, Brett. I really appreciate it.
Sure, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I would love if you could just give yourself a quick little introduction and tell the audience who you are.
Sure. Well, as you know, my name is Brett Blumenthal. I'm an author and basically I would say a lifestyle expert. My path has been really windy, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that, but I'm an architect and my MBA. I was management consulting for over 10 years, and through a variety of journeys, I finally arrived to what I do today. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay, that's wonderful. So I know that you started out in the architecture life and doing business and so forth. When did you realize that you wanted a change or that wasn't necessarily the dream life that you were hoping for?
Oh, I can think back all the way when I started undergraduate, and I knew that I was looking for the perfect career and perfect job and like perfect life. And so I was constantly searching for years, like what I thought I should be doing. And I was sort of raised in this you should be a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief household. And, intellectually I was capable of it, and I went to architecture school, and I even went on that path for a while. But I always deep down was searching for something else. I was never quite content or happy. And so I think I always knew that something needed to change, but I think it was only when I finally went to a life coach or a career coach, I would say.
Yeah.
And she, kept hearing themes of wellness and self-help, and she's like, "Why are you not doing that?" And it was just never something I really thought about. But I dabbled on the side doing it, and then after being laid off from a job I really was not happy again with, that was when I sort of took the leap of faith and tried doing something on my own.
That's wonderful. So I know that having a life coach or a career coach in your life can be a huge bout of support. But what inner power or belief helped you make that transition so successfully and so happily?
Sure. I mean, I think that more than anything, some real belief in yourself is important. And if you're not in a place that you have that, then it's something you really need to focus on, I think, first. In A Whole New You, the new book that just came out, I talk a lot about self-awareness. And I think that when a lot of people try to make changes in their life or transform some aspect of their life, they do it because they feel they should, or because they have to, or because it's something that they really, have been pushed to do by somebody else sometimes. And if it's not authentic to them, the change isn't going to work. And so really believing in yourself means really knowing yourself. And to know yourself, you really have to take the time to do that sort of self, development and introspection. And so I think that's sort of the first and foremost, most important thing anyone can do when they're thinking about making any kind of change in their life.
I like that. It's almost like using the setback of getting laid off gave you that time
Right.
to really get to know you and figure out what you want to do.
Well, it forced me to go out of my comfort zone. And I think a lot
It's a
of
good lesson.
times I actually just wrote about this, complacency.
Yeah.
And we often fall victim to a life that's not really meant to be ours, and we end up becoming okay with things, and we become comfortable.
Yeah.
And that kind of limits our ability to then like push ourselves out of our comfort zone and say, okay, I need to change something to live a better life for myself. And so I think a layoff, which a lot of people can view negatively, can provide individuals that sort of opportunity to then say, well, now what? Now what am I going to do? And it kind of gives them, especially if they're laid off, there's often some sort of severance package. So they're not feeling like they have to immediately find a new job. They have sort of that time period to say, okay, now maybe it's time to focus on me.
Yeah. So I know that you had some pretty strong inner beliefs that helped you get past this and create a life that you love. But what fears or limitations did you have to work through or move past to get to this place?
Sure. Well, I think the idea that I had to be this person that I was raised to be, and nothing against my parents. My parents did a great job of actually really allowing me to explore many different things. But in my own mind, I had this perception that I was a corporate person and I was meant to be in corporate America. And I really just didn't know that there was this other opportunity. It just wasn't, the idea of being a creative person wasn't something that I took seriously. And so I wouldn't say it was so much a fear as much as it's a limiting thought. You limit yourself by thinking or perceiving yourself a certain way, as opposed to allowing yourself to expand your mind, to allow yourself to entertain all these other possibilities. And so I think that was probably one of the bigger obstacles. And I think even after I started this journey on what I'm doing now, I struggled with, well, people who I graduated from business school, often they didn't even want to hear about what I was doing because it's not in their domain, And I struggled greatly with, like, who am I? I'm not anybody, has any interest in anything I'm doing. They all think it's fluff, And so I think as a result, you have to get past your inner demons and what other people, so many of us fall victim to, like, thinking we have to be someone that everybody else expects us to be. And so getting past that, I think it was the biggest challenge for me.
I definitely can see how having the support of a life coach or a career coach and then that belief in yourself while getting past all of these can make the journey not better paved, but just you had a good solid foundation, at least from what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
But what other outside resources or family or friends did you rely on during this, big revolution, this transformation?
Sure. Well, for starters, I think it's really important to push out the negativity. And just like I was explaining, I had this whole experience of all these people being like, whatever you do, I don't know what it is. And it's obviously not important because it's not business. It's really important to, like, push those people out of your mindset or even limit your time with them because they end up really taking away from your ability to move forward in a direction that's important to you. So that's one thing. I did a lot of reading. I decided to write a book. And so it was, do I self-publish? Do I go through traditional methods? And for me, to know if this was even something to entertain, I needed to test it. I needed to know if I could make money doing it. And so, it meant having a product of some sort that I would sell. And the only thing I could think of at the time was a book, because that was what I was mostly doing, was writing. So,
and which one was your first one again? I hate to interrupt you.
No, here. I do have this one.
I always get confused.
It's Get Real and Stop Dieting. And it's really thin. I mean, it's not a big book. And I really wrote it in like 3 months. And it did really well. But it was just sort of a test. It wasn't really meant to be this major publication that would be sold thousands of, of copies. But it was more of like, are people even interested in anything I have to say? And so that, it's testing the market, I think.
Like an experiment.
Yeah, exactly. So that was another thing that I did sort of get me into another, format of what I was doing. Did that answer your question?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm always just interested because obviously my library is filled with growth and awareness and mindfulness books, and I'm always looking for new resources. And of course, I love your books, so I was just curious. But
I mean, I think depending on what you do, you need to look at the books that, I mean, if you know what you want to do. I mean, I think that first knowing what you want to do is the first step. And then once you do, I think it's really important to do the research and to understand what will it take. A lot of people, they're really afraid to, especially around their career, make a big jump. Especially if it seems like something they don't really know much about. And I just wrote a post on Sheer Balance that talked about how this woman who was really interested in interior design, she would do all these little side projects for friends and family, but she was in finance and, you know, she made good money. And so she really struggled with, like, hating her job, getting up in the morning and really just not liking what she was doing. And then having this other thing that she loved doing, but she didn't take seriously. And I think we all have one of those. I feel like that was something I was doing for, you know, for a while. So, you know, it's asking the questions like, well, what's the worst thing that can happen if you know, leave this job and try something different? And what will it take? Because a lot of people, I think that, you know, they're like, oh, well, how the heck am I even going to get there? Like, how am I even start? And, you know, it takes research. Like, what will it require from a means, a knowledge, even a financial standpoint? And what's the worst that can happen if you take the leap?
Yeah.
And I think if you can push to answer those questions, but also push the fears out, like when you start answering questions and really looking at it from a logical, rational perspective, you stop going into that emotional side, which often can cause us to steer away from exactly what we want.
I like that. And I think that's one of the things I loved most about A Whole New You is the first chapter. You built such a great foundation of research. And between that and your message of being willing and open and responsible for your own life and for the changes in your life, I think that's just exactly what you need to make the change. And that's why I'm doing these interviews, is to provide you know, resources and research to show that it's possible, that you can get through all the different windings to make it work.
Right. Absolutely.
So looking at your entire life, because you know, you are a lifestyle expert, how have all of these...
It sounds weird saying it, but...
No, it makes complete sense. How have all of these different changes and experiences affected your life today and made it better or what it is?
I think in general, I mean, the one phrase to use to sum it all up would be, I'm at peace with myself more than I ever was. I think
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when intuition is one of those things that we often don't listen to, and you know, we push it down. It gets cluttered. We get confused between intuition and rational thinking. You know, we rationalize away a lot of our intuition. And so I think when you're finally in a place where you're doing what you love, or you're in a life that you love, you can feel more at peace about all the decisions you're making and all the things that you're doing. And there's definitely days when I'm like, what the heck am I doing? Or am I, you know, making the right decision today? Or, you know, was this really the best move at this point? And I think that's human nature. We should always be asking ourselves, you know, the difficult questions. But I think that more than I was in the past, I'm more at peace with what my values are, what's important to me, how I view life and what I want to get out of it. I think a lot of people, if you were to ask them today, like when you're 75 or 80 and you look back on your life, you know, what would you want, you know, to be able to say about it? A lot of people struggle with that very basic question. And I think that the more you can get to the roots of who you are, and the more you can create the life around those values that you believe in, the more at peace you'll be.
I love that. I love the foundation of knowing who you really are or what really matters to you, and how there's really no finish line. It's more about finding peace, like you said. I love that.
And life is a process. I mean, what's important to me today might not be important to me, you know, especially as you know, I'm pregnant. So who knows what that's going to bring. Once a child is in your life, you have no idea. Like that can change everything, your perspective, what you value, you know, those things can shift. And I think being open to being flexible and staying flexible throughout your life to allow for those changes in your mindsets or in your values or in your priorities, it's really important because life is not a linear process or journey.
No, I completely agree, and I am on the same page.
I think you are, given all that I read on your site. So
I find it's actually much easier when you're just open to life and the changes that come with it. It was so much effort to struggle against it that it's actually a lot easier when you just go with it.
yeah, I mean, the change is no doubt hard, but I, for whatever reason, I've always loved change. I've never been things get to be too static or, you know, status quo or just mundane, I get very bored and itchy.
Yeah.
And there are people who really have a problem with embracing that change. But the more you can, I think the more happiness you'll find.
I'm getting there to loving it.
Good.
So
loving it is good.
My last question, I can't believe we're almost done. Do you have any advice for those that are hesitant to make the leap or to drastically change their life?
Sure. I think, you know, Gretchen Rubin, who's a friend and I kind of consider a bit of a mentor, she may not know that, but she interviewed me for her site, The Happiness Project, and she asked, one of the questions she asked was, what do you think holds people from finding true happiness? And, you know, more and more when I talk to people or like hear their stories or learn about their struggles, I think fear and regret are the two biggest things that really hold people back from finding what they want in life.
Yeah.
Fear is so focused in the future. You know, we worry about what's going to happen, and we often, it's just, I think, our nature to dream up the worst possible scenario that could happen. You totally discount like all of the good things that could happen. And more often than not, you know, 99% of the time, you know, those things never manifest. You know, that taking the leap of faith and pushing past the fear and you know, stopping the worrying is actually going to provide probably more benefit than not doing it. As a matter of fact, most people who live with regret the things that they don't do versus the things that they do and did badly or wrong. You know, I've done things where I look back and they were failures in my mind in some sense, but I never look at the failure as a bad thing. I think of it as it was a lesson learned, a mistake possibly, but something I can learn from and possibly use in the future to, you know, make better decisions or so forth. And the regret piece, you know, I know a lot of people who stay in a place that they're not happy with, and they're so paralyzed by the regrets of their past because they feel like because they made all those mistakes in the past or they made bad decisions in the past, that their life is over and that's their lot in life. And that's like the worst possible way to think. You know, every day is really a new beginning.
It's like believing in punishment. Like you're being, like you deserve your punishment for everything you regret. Yeah. And it sounds like there's an underlying message of more so living in the moment as well. So fear is that idea of what's happening in the present, and regret's always looking back. And I can't agree more. I think that for those that want to make those big changes like I do in my life, you really have to focus on what's happening now and who you are now and go from there.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, we hear it more and more that living in the moment brings a lot more happiness to an individual than focusing on what happened in the past or worrying about the future. So
I seriously learned so much from every one of these calls.
Well, great. That's fantastic. So you're helping not only your readers and your listeners and your viewers, but yourself through these calls.
That's where this came from. I said, I want to talk to all these people and figure out how they got from A to B and see what they did and what they felt. So you feel less alone if you're going through the same journey.
Well, I love the fact that you're doing sort of the video perspective versus like the written, because most of the things I do in interviews are written, you know. So this is much more, brings it much more to life, I think.
It's more fun for me, actually. So do you have a copy of your new book? I'd love for everybody to see it. No? I can go grab mine.
I have to like go in the other room.
Oh, I can grab mine. Wait.
Okay. There you are.
Okay.
Yay!
So this is it. I love
Did you
it.
get the gloss? You got the glossy.
Oh, yeah.
So there's matte and glossy, and they're all supposed to be matte, and for some reason, some of them ended up glossy.
I like it. I think it's wonderful.
I like the matte because it's like a softer finish.
Yeah.
But as long as the people who are happy, that's all that matters.
I think the content's what matters.
Absolutely right. I get hung. See, I'm the perfectionist. I get hung up on these little details.
Oh, it's fine. So, is there anything else you'd like to tell the readers and listeners? I guess more so.
Just take each day at a time, and really listen to yourself, and really believe in yourself. That would be probably it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Brett. This was
you.
Wonderful, and I know that your story is just going to be another feather of inspiration added to those hesitant to fly, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I love that analogy that you use.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's a really creative way of putting that. So.
Well, it's the image I came up with is these wings, and I thought, oh, that's perfect. But thank you.
You're very welcome. And thank you so much for having me, and Happy New Year.
Thanks.